Well, good morning, everybody, and I want to welcome you all to the Mindset Matters series. And um, for those of you who have joined us before, this is a series where um, we really believe that shared experiences connect people, and so it's an initiative that we're really pleased to be a part of. I'm Louise Hanson. I'm the manager of corporate client relations here at Dalton Associates, and a part of the Encompas team. And I'm with my colleague Suze. If you want to introduce yourself, Suze.
Sure can. I'm Suze. I'm part of the Encompass program, the care management team. And also another hat that I have is I'm part of the on-call counseling that provides rapid access counseling services to members and their families.
Thank you. And really pleased to have Bernie here today as our speaker. Bernie is a firefighter, and in 2019 he retired after 36 years of service. And at that point, District Chief of Operations for Fire Hall 345 on Dufferin Street at DuPont. And we're so pleased, Bernie, to have you here today as an inspirational example of a first responder who has overcome adversity, addiction, and mental health issues during your career. I know you've been an active voice and a change maker in the first responder community through peer support engagement and really leaning in to support those who may be suffering in silence. And so we really are pleased to have Bernie here because his story is one of experience and strength and hope. And we so appreciate your courage and generosity in sharing your journey with us today, because we know how important it is for people to know that they're not alone, and that there's hope and that there are supports. So welcome, Bernie. Thank you so much for being here today. Um, just before I turn it over to you, I'd like to share a couple of housekeeping points. We have purposely disabled cameras and microphones so that everyone can participate in this session anonymously. We are recording this presentation and we will post it on the encompasscare.ca website, and that's been really valuable for those who might not be able to attend today to be able to access it, or oftentimes people will go back and rewatch it or share it. We're probably going to hold questions till the end so that Bernie can have an opportunity to really share his journey first. But please, you can submit your questions as you think of them or your comments through the Q&A feature. And those come only to our team here when you submit those. And we'll keep an eye and we'll put your questions forward to Bernie, either when he's finished or as we go through, whichever makes most sense there. As Bernie's speaking, if you don't have any questions or comments, you can certainly show him that you're out there and listening. If you type, AAAA on your computer, it lets him know that things are, he's doing an awesome job or that it's resonating with you. So feel free to do that as well. So without kind of further ado, we'll get going, Bernie, in this conversation. And like I said, so appreciate you being here today with us.
Thank you, Louise, for the nice introduction.
Yeah.
I guess my job here will be to give you kind of an idea of what I've been through over the course of my career and some of my challenges that I've had. And it has been a wonderful 36-year career, and I have had lots of ups and downs. So the nice thing about it is that when I did retire at 36 years, I felt as though it was a very worthwhile career, and I really left the job enjoying it and loving it. And it's mostly because of some of the work I had to do during the dark part of my job. So, but okay, I'm going to take you back to I was 23 years old and working on a construction site. And at lunchtime, I called home to talk to my wife, and she told me that the city of Scarborough had called me and they want me to call them back. And I knew why, because I had already been through the process. The we had a physical, we had to pass a aptitude test, interview, and I was pretty excited because I knew that this meant that I was going to get hired by the fire department, and that was my dream job. I had been trying for years to get on, and it was such a relief to find out that I was going to be part of this great fire department in Scarborough, and so that was how it started. And once I got through my training and onto the job, I fit right in. I really liked it. Um, it was 1983, so you can imagine it had a different look back then. It was all men. It was a real macho position. We didn't show our feelings. You sucked it up and you just kept on moving and you just stuffed things down. And that seemed to work for a while. Just to be able to forget about it. And I guess one of the things that they can never prepare you for is some of the horrific sights that you see working as a first responder. So those were things that I had a real hard time with in the beginning. uh, Sleepless nights, but I found a way to suppress that, to push it away, and just deal with it and carry on. So during the early part, I ended up, I got married. Actually, got married during my training, and shortly after that, we started having a family, had a couple of kids, and things were going pretty good. I really was loving the job. I felt really proud to be serving the community, and it was just, it was one of those jobs that I really, really enjoyed going to work. I liked it. I couldn't wait to get there, and it was like that for quite a few years. So somewhere during about the 15-year mark of my career, um, I started to feel some pressures and, pressures from home, a little bit of pressure from the job. Um, I don't know for sure how much how much it was trauma that was getting to me, but again, we didn't have peer support teams or crisis intervention teams, and nobody was talking to therapists or going to groups or anything like that. We just had to suck it up and deal with it, and that was kind of that was the only way that we could do it. And one of the things that we used to help us be somewhat resilient was dark humor. And the type of dark humor that obviously wouldn't be acceptable in the workplace today, but back then it was a different time, and it was something that it did help. um, I also found a community of firefighters that like to play hockey and like to drink a lot, and those were the guys I really gravitated towards, because that was during that part of my career. I really, like I said, I really, really felt attached to this wonderful career, and I really liked to be with the guys. And anyways, I got to the point where I was wanting to be with the guys more than I wanted to go home. So anyway, you can imagine how things started getting at home. Things got tough, and the alcohol consumption increased, and I got to a point there where I started to abuse some substances, and in particular, it was cocaine. I really found that that stimulant, it really did something to me. It gave me some energy, and I could keep going, and I could party all night with that. And you know, uh, it happens so slowly that you don't see how it creeps up on you and starts to grab you. Right now, I got to the point where I started to be a little bit irresponsible at work, and I was missing days, and it seemed like all of these pressures were weighing on me. But I always found a solution for that, and that was if I picked up a drink. And once I started drinking, I would easily forget about all my problems. It was like the magic potion. So, of course, it's the type of thing that's very progressive, and the alcohol use got worse. The cocaine use got worse. I found a few like-minded people on the fire department that liked to do the same thing. So of course, that was who I gravitated towards. So I stopped hanging around with the pardon me, the good, responsible firefighters that loved their job, and I started hanging around with people that were more interested in getting drunk and getting high and partying and coming into work, and there were times where I just really wasn't able to function in the mornings, especially. So um, now things started getting a little bit worse just around the time I was also hanging around with a group of people outside of the job, and that like to do a lot of drugs. And it's funny because at the time I thought I was cool. I thought I was cool, and it was a big secret, and nobody knew what was going on. And boy, if they could only have this wonderful life that I have, they'd be really happy too. But anyway, I was getting worse and more miserable. And this circle of friends that I had, we started to the cocaine use turned into freebasing. So I don't know how many people know what that means, but basically it's like a chemical reaction that you can do to take that cocaine, and it turns it into a rock. And then next thing I know, I'm smoking this stuff, and now I'm really not going to work because I'd get up in the morning and I couldn't function, and I would end up making excuses and calling my chief and telling him that, oh, my wife had an accident, or my kid's sick, or it was always someone else's fault. So um, it started to get out of hand. That freebasing use, I took that to the next level. And about somewhere around, I would say it was somewhere around the maybe late 90s that that freebasing turned into just outright crack and going to see a crack dealer. And there were times where I would miss work, I'd phone in sick, and I would get up that day and I would feel horrible. What have I done? Okay, I'm not being responsible with my family. I can't go to work. I can't function. And somewhere along the line, I would say, I'm not doing that again. I would make that vow on the lives of my children that I was done with this stuff. I'm finished. And then somewhere around 11 o'clock in the morning, I get this crazy idea in my head that, maybe it would be okay to just have one. So anyway, off I went, and then this spree started again, and the whole cycle repeated itself, and I wasn't going to work. So um, I had a friend of mine um, who worked for the city. Now, by this time, all these fire departments amalgamated, 6 fire departments amalgamated. We were now under the umbrella of the city of Toronto, and a friend of mine working there at City of Toronto um, had suggested that I had a problem and I needed to get some help. So he gave me a phone number, and I went down to Metro Hall and I talked to a lady down there, and I'm sure she was a social worker. It's very vague, that memory, but I went down to see her, and she recommended that I get into a residential treatment facility. So that was um, that was in November of 2002, and it wasn't until March the following year. So it was 5 months later that I finally um, had hit bottom, or so I thought, enough that I was ready to get some help. And the shame of what I was doing at this point, I was carrying this around, and I couldn't tell people at work because the stigma attached to that type of drug I was using. Nobody would have wanted to work with me. But what I didn't realize, that while all this was going on, I'm pretty sure that these guys didn't want to work with me anyway, because I would just come in and go hide somewhere in the station, and I wasn't. I stopped playing hockey with them. I stopped socializing with them. I was just doing my own thing. My life was out of control. So um, it was at that point in March of 2002 that I got introduced to the Renaissance house up in Brooklyn, and it was a 21-day treatment facility, and um, it was a 12-step program. Now, I didn't know anything about 12-step programs, and we went to AA meetings and NA meetings on a regular basis, and they basically tried to teach us, the principles of that program, and how to use them in your life, to cope with things. And I think for me, growing up in a big family, my dad worked two jobs. My dad was an alcoholic. Um, Coping skills were really not something that I learned when I was young. So, my coping was whether I was coping with stress at home or coping with things I saw at work. My coping became my substance abuse, which obviously wasn't very healthy for me, or for my family. So I did my 21 days up at that treatment facility, and I think going into that place, the hardest thing that I had to do was um, call my two children, who would have been 16, 16 and 13 at the time. So I had to call them down and tell them, this is what's been going on, and I'm going to be going away for 3 weeks. And it was not only was it devastating for them, but they knew something was going on because I wasn't coming home a lot of times. So they knew that I was up to something, but they didn't know. So now I had to come clean. So, but anyways, I got out of that facility, um, and I tried going to meetings on and off, and but I went through a 9 month period where my life was absolute hell, and I couldn't seem to get a grasp on this thing, and things just kept getting worse. My marriage broke up. I ended up leaving the house, and then I went through this period where I was, living in basement apartments from here and there all over the place, just trying to get my act together. Now at this point, I couldn't go to work. Um, and my captain, who was a friend of mine, he was a childhood friend of mine at the time, he called me up and says, "Bernie, you got to come to work. You got to come to work." But I couldn't face it. So anyway, on January the 4th of 2004, so it was about 9 months after I'd been to that treatment facility, um, I'd had one more relapse, and I don't know what the difference was between that one and all the rest of them, but maybe I felt like I had no other place to go, or my bottom couldn't get any worse. I was on the verge of getting fired at work. Just my life was a disaster. Um, so I ended up making the decision to go back to the meetings, and really trying to make some changes. So I did for a long time. I went to meetings every day, AA meetings, NA meetings, CA meetings, and I started to do what they asked me to do, or what they told me to do, because I was in enough pain that I was willing to surrender to them and say, "What do you guys want me to do? I've tried everything else, right? Nothing's working for me. I have no willpower whatsoever." So anyways, I really embraced that 12-step program. And it was hard at first because, they talk about, you hear the word God a lot. It's in the steps and it's in the program. And but it was pretty simple. I got a sponsor who um, made it clear to me that it's just a power greater than yourself. That's what we call it. It's a higher power greater than yourself. It could be anything. So I just used all the people in the meetings that were clean and sober. That was my God moment. It was like, oh my God, these guys, they got something going here. So I just stayed with them. Um, I started doing the work that was required. Um, we have these little slogans that we use. Some people may have heard them before, things like keep coming back one day at a time, that type of thing. So that one day at a time slogan was really instrumental to me, because I started to use it on a regular basis. Even when I went back to work, I thought, okay, I'm going to go back to work now. I'd had discussions with my chief. He knew what was going on. He'd given me a lot of slack. Okay. He'd given me a lot of slack. He was really good to me. And then I finally went back, but I used that little slogan to help me just get through one day. That's it. Right. I don't have to worry about anything else. I'm just going to go to work, keep my nose to the grindstone, and do a good job. Okay. And that's all I can do. If everybody has opinions about me, well, I can't change that. and I deserve it because I've earned that because of my behavior, not being there. So I I found that the days started piling up, one at a time. Um, I wasn't being off sick anymore. I started to gain the trust of my fellow firefighters again. I talked to my superiors, my captains and my chiefs, who watched me go on this spiraling, um, destructive behavior that I had. I admitted to them that I had a problem, and I told them what I was doing about it. And it was amazing how supportive everybody was when I came clean. Like, really, I didn't tell everybody. I remained fairly anonymous. I just let my actions speak for me, that they could trust Bernie again. You know what I mean? So, and as time went on, they started to trust me, and they could see that I'd made changes. And when we went out with the guys for hockey or retirement things, I wasn't drinking anymore, right? And if someone asked me why, I would just be straight and say, well, I had a problem and I'm not drinking anymore. So that was it. They didn't care. They really didn't care. So, all this guilt that I felt, all I had to do was go to work and be responsible and be a good firefighter. So, um, I my marriage ended up breaking up. There was no salvaging it. I went through an awful time through my separation and divorce when my wages got garnished. And anyways, it was just horrific stuff. However, I really, really stayed in touch with people that were sober. My old friends that I used to hang around with. If I did happen to be somewhere with them, I knew when it was time to leave. But I made a new group of friends. We call it a fellowship, and it really is. So, I found people that were like minded, and I really started to enjoy being with them because we started having fun and doing wonderful things and not drinking or using. So anyway, my life started getting better. Um, I started to go through the promotional ranks at work, which was pretty amazing for a guy that couldn't go to work for such a long period of time, and nobody had any trust in me. All of a sudden, next thing you know, I'm an acting captain, and then I get promoted to captain, and then someone says you should really write the district chief's exam. So I ended up writing the district chief's exam, and I ended up passing the exam, and just waiting for my spot. So now, the last few years on the fire department for me, I'm going to say were the best. I had made a decision that I love that job. It did that job did so much for me that I wanted to give something back. So I joined the peer support team. I went to all the peer support training. I took the peer support courses, the International Association of Firefighters behavioral health courses, and road to mental readiness courses, and suicide prevention. And I did everything I could so that I could be a valuable member of the peer support team. And in particular, I wanted people to know um, that if they were having alcohol or substance abuse problems, and there is a lot of that on the fire department, and probably on other emergency services as well. But the fire department we had a lot of people that were really struggling with, mental health issues, and substance abuse. So I wanted to give something back, and I found that for me, trying to be clean and sober, the thing that enhanced that the absolute most was when I tried to give something back. So, in AA, I did it, and I still do it. I try to give something back. I try to help other people by sharing my experience. So, as a peer support worker, I was doing the same thing, but there was more aspects to the job, obviously. We would do debriefings and things when crews had difficult calls or they had something traumatic that they witnessed. We would go to the station and talk to them, and we would maybe share a bit of our experience, and also let them know of all the amazing resources that we have available now. And that's the remarkable thing, is that we have a long list of um, facilities and people and therapists that we can recommend. And that was, anyway, that was something that I did that really probably, I didn't do it selfishly. I did it because I wanted to give back, but it did more for me than I ever could have imagined. So, winding down my last couple of years, I got promoted to full district chief. They sent me out to the West End. I was full of fear because I was going to the busiest, heaviest fire district in the city, and I didn't know anybody. And um, I was pretty nervous about it. As soon as I got out there, I put my transfer in to come back to Scarborough. And after a few weeks, I really started realizing that what a great bunch of guys here. And they really treated me very well. So I decided to finish my career there. Um, but I also had one other thing that I wanted to do. I wanted to help specifically firefighters that were struggling with alcohol or substance abuse, and not through peer support, but to start a meeting. And I got together with another guy that was had the same background as me, and we talked to the chief and the union and other peer support workers, and we got permission to start hosting a meeting for firefighters that were having substance abuse issues. And we didn't necessarily make it a 12-step meeting because we we wanted to have all the we want to be open minded to things that work for other people. So um, we were able to use the union office on the first Wednesday of every month. All the union executive people would go home so that we would be able to keep it anonymous. And the meeting got very popular. We called it the Phoenix Group. And if you know anything about the phoenix, which is the mythical bird that rises up from the ashes every morning, and um, what a greater, I can't think of a better description of a bunch of firefighters whose lives had been burnt to the ground, and now we're reviving them. So we had a lot of great success there, and then COVID came. We switched to online meetings, and um, here we are, like 5 or 6 years later. So the meetings kind of fizzled out a little bit, but I'm determined to keep something going, and I've in the works right now, in the process of getting something a daytime, regular, once a week meeting for first responders. Focusing, it'll be predominantly 12 step, but everybody will be welcome. So um, I'll keep Suze informed of that in case you do have anybody in particular that might be interested in that. It'll be in the Durham area, but so that's pretty much the nuts and bolts of my experience with the fire service and my addiction issues, and my retirement has been a whole other story. I don't know if I have time to get into that part of it, but it's really been magnificent. Um, I left the job with such a great feeling, and it's only because I got the help that I needed, and I did the work that was required. So I left that job with a great love for it, but knowing that 36 years was enough, it was time to go. I had a couple grandkids, and I wanted to travel, and so for the past 5 years, with the exception of a little bit of a COVID break, that's what I've been doing. I've been spending time with my grandkids and watching them grow up and being the best husband and the best father and the best grandfather that I could be. Um, I'm still very, very active with my AA groups, and with a lot of other emergency, first responders and firefighters that are having substance abuse program problems. So um, you might notice my voice is a bit raspy, partially because I'm a bit jet lagged. I was traveling. I got to check off a couple of bucket list items last week, which were just, it was a phenomenal experience. And I know that I'm only able to do these things because today I'm clean and sober, and I know if I think it's okay to have a drink or go see the dealer, I know where it's going to take me because I did it long enough. I'm powerless over that stuff. So um, I had, I guess there's one other little thing that happened to me since during COVID. Um, I started getting a sore throat, and it turned out that I had a tumor on the base of my tongue. And there was three senior firefighters in the same station. We all had exactly the same thing. It was squamous cell carcinoma, and the treatment was horrific, to say the least. It was 35 radiation treatments on my throat with chemo and a feeding tube. And so one of the guys that was on my crew that ended up with the same thing, he ended up passing away from it. He didn't make it. The other guy's still going strong, and I'm 3.5 years now, cancer free. So I just keep my fingers crossed and just try and stay healthy and get to that 5 year mark, and hopefully at that 5 year mark, I'm over the hump. But, um, you know, going through that difficult time, I I applied a lot of the principles that I learned in the 12-step program, and it was just like, let's just get through today, that's all, right? I felt there was times where I didn't think I was going to make it, but I just got to make it through the next couple minutes, I just got to, get through today, and tomorrow will be different. And things just kept getting better for me. So, but that's kind of how my life has been going since I made that decision to give up all those things that were killing me. That my life has progressively got better. And I don't know. There's probably a whole bunch of stories I could tell you, but I don't want to bore you with that. So I guess I that's enough from me. If I could turn it back to Louise and Sue's, and you guys can take over from here.
Oh,
Thank
no,
you,
thank
Bernie.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Bernie. And I'll just say to those of you who are on the call, if you have any questions or comments, please put those in the Q&A. Bernie, I just want to thank you so much, because it's evident that you went through some really hard, dark times. Um, and to hear how long have you been clean and sober now?
I've been clean and sober for 20 years. I was clean and sober 20 years on January 5th this year.
Amazing,
Hmm.
amazing.
Hmm.
And
At a time.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
But to hear, kind of how dark things were for you, and to hear you talk now about your retirement, and how much pleasure you get out of giving back, and focus on your health. It's really inspirational. And I guess, I'm curious what you would say, and I'm sure you've had lots of these conversations in the work that you do, but for anybody who's at that dark place, what kind of guidance would you give them? Or is there something, looking back on your own life, that you wish somebody would have done, or you would have done, to kind of make that um, you know, an easier pathway?
I I can imagine that if anybody tried to give me advice when I was in the midst of that, I probably wouldn't have listened, to be honest with you. I was so wrapped up in it, and I was so powerless over it. Um, I you know, it's possible that maybe if I had the tools to deal with difficult, stressful situations, that I feel like a lot of stuff kept building up with me. And I was just like stuffing things down and stuffing things down. And maybe if we were a little bit more open on the fire department, talking about things, a little bit more open about um, you know our feelings. Like one of the things that you don't do at the fire hall is sit at the table and talk about your feelings, right? So but I can do that, at my 12-step groups. I can do that. I can talk about my feelings. And for somebody that is struggling, I just try and let them know that, like, I've been there. Um, I've seen people even worse than me that have been there, that kept trying and trying and trying, and then one day it just clicked, and all of a sudden, they were able to turn it around. And I would say, like, that nobody should ever give up on that, and it depends on your pain tolerance level too, right? Some people can really hit bottom and end up on the street. And if you're fortunate enough that you feel enough pain that you're willing to do whatever it takes, and it's a lot of work, I'm not going to deny that, right? But but it's so worth it. It's all so worth it. So
Yeah, thank you. Suze, you had a question?
There's a couple things that are coming in on the chat. First, somebody wants to congratulate you on your soberversary. So I think that's
thank you.
awesome. Yeah. And someone wanted to know, as care managers, my throat is really raspy today. I'm fighting a cold too, so just one sec. Sorry. Someone wants to know, as care managers, how can we support first responders who are grappling with their internal shame of addiction, knowing that they have been the person attending calls with addiction, passing judgment, perhaps arresting people, and now being one of those people? How do we support them to get past that shame? And I was thinking about when you were talking earlier in your conversation about when you first started out in this field, nobody talked about anything. It was the culture of you don't feel, you just show up, you stuff it down, and how that really can perpetuate that shame. And while we have really done a lot of work to move away from and really try to humanize those conversations of struggle and hope, perhaps maybe speak a little bit to that question about how we can support specifically with those feelings of shame. What would have helped you to get through that?
Yeah, the shame was a really big issue for me, and the fear of that's what really made it so fearful to me.
Oh, lost your sound, Bernie.
Oh,
Oh, there you are, back again.
okay. Yeah, I don't know what happened here. Yeah, the shame of what I was doing, and a lot of it was I was doing secretly. Like, a lot of people later on, they were surprised. A lot of people didn't know what was going on. They knew that was irresponsible, but they didn't know the whole story. Um, but I think that I knew that I had to prove myself again, and that was going to be very difficult. So, going back and knowing that I'm coming from this dark place where, I was smoking crack in hotels on Kingston Road in Scarborough by myself. I mean, like that's where I was. So now I had to go back and prove to my coworkers that they could trust me. And it was a very slow process. I mean, I'm like like I said, I'm 20 years clean and sober, but the first couple years were hard. And I would say that you just string these days together and you do the work that's required. And there's always going to be somebody who might judge or criticize you. And there's nothing we can do about that, right? As long as, if I know in my heart that I'm doing my best and I'm clean and sober and people can trust me, I think eventually they start to see that, for the most part, they will. And it just, like I said, it's hard work. You just got to keep going, the road. What is it? The road of 1,000 miles starts with one step, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and I mean, I feel like honestly, my heart breaks for people that are in that position because I've worked past it, but I know what it was like. It wasn't easy. So there's no simple solution to that. You have to face it and keep doing the work.
I'm wondering, in your role as peer support, do you see almost some common themes or common challenges with first responders that are facing in recovery or in their struggle?
Yeah, absolutely. I think um, we're seeing a lot more diagnosed cases of PTSD, and my wife's not a psychologist, but she she says you definitely have PTSD. So, and I've never been diagnosed officially that I have PTSD, but I certainly have some signs of it. But that's a big thing. I think that there's a lot of trauma in first responders that they're carrying around with them and not having the tools. But I know for me that this 12-step program, it's such a simple program, and it gives me tools that I need to cope with things that bother me. on a daily basis. So now I don't let them pile up. It's not like that thermometer just, getting, you know, redder and redder until it bursts, and then I'm off, out hiding in hotels somewhere on Kingston Road. So but that's been a common theme with lately with first responders, people that I talk to. So you try and incorporate um, staying clean and sober, and a lot of times they'll be working with a therapist, and we just try and obviously always recommend that they get outside help, outside of the help that we can give them. So, but we're a support group, we're a bunch of people who don't drink and don't use drugs, and we can be there to relate and identify with them.
Yeah, and I think that thank you, that just letting things pile up, kind of the backpack just
Hmm.
overflows. And you had 15 years, right, before things started to derail, which is a long time, a lot of experiences, and that can build up. So, figuring out a way to unpack that on a regular basis, I think is really really valuable. And it sounds like you have that in the in the meetings. Um, and maybe you can talk a little bit about the meetings. I mean, that might be of interest to people to understand what goes on in those meetings anyway, for anybody who's never gone.
Yeah, the door to the AA meeting is always seems to be the last door on the block for people. They don't want to go there, and there's a stigma that goes with that too. So I know lots of firefighters that um, they just they just couldn't make that step, to come and join us there for some reason. But you know, there's nothing intimidating about it. Um, and people get scared hearing about that God thing. And I know there's an awful lot of people in the cemetery that couldn't wrap their head around a higher power, and that's the unfortunate thing. So we tell people um, to keep coming back and find a meeting that you like. There's different kinds of meetings. There's meetings that are like a speaker format where they would share like I did today, for 20 minutes or so. Um, and they do some readings and, drink some coffee and have some fellowship. There's also discussion meetings that are a little bit more intimate where there might be a topic on the table, and people can talk about that. But, you're like, I'm always around people that have been through the same thing, not necessarily first responders, but all walks of life, and there's all kinds of meetings, and some are good and some don't work for me. And sometimes people walk into a meeting and they don't feel right, or the people that are there, they don't seem, it's like they walk in and go, oh, I'm not like you guys. And then they never come back again.
Right.
So until they are just like those guys, right?
That terminal uniqueness, right?
Yeah, we like to
Yeah.
keep them as long, we like to keep them. You just keep coming back. And I think the big thing, I heard a great saying a while ago, giving is living. So when you're constantly taking from people, you're never satisfied. But when you give back to people, that's when things start to turn for you. It's like for me, giving back into the program. When I started sponsoring other people, it really enhanced my sobriety.
Yeah, and we know that when you're talking about reaching out and asking for help or even going to a meeting, when you are viewed as the helper, being a first responder, as the one who helps others, that stigma and that reluctance can be very much reality in terms of, you know, trying to almost convince yourself that it's okay to need help, that saying of it's okay to not be okay. And to really, it can take a lot. It can take a lot for, we know from the work that we do in the Encompass program that it takes a lot for someone to reach out and to ask for support when you are in that role of always being the one that people go to for help and support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big part of why I really want to get this meeting, first responders meeting, going in Durham so that other first responders can come and definitely identify with what we're going through, and I know it's hard, like especially like for a police officer to walk into an AA meeting who doesn't know if there's somebody there that they had arrested, and I know it's a big issue, right? So, but hopefully, I'm hoping within the next month or so I should have something a little more concrete, and people in the area will have something going once a week for first responders, and when they walk in that room, they know that it's other first responders, and hopefully they'll feel comfortable there like that. So
That's amazing. I love that. Thank you for being
I
of
appreciate
service.
you, yeah, keeping us updated on that.
yeah, I will.
Brittany, if I could just go back a little bit, just some other questions. You went into inpatient treatment. I know it was a long time ago and maybe things have changed a lot. Um, that's a really hard step for people to take. Um,
Mhm.
any, I guess, anything that you can share with us around how you overcame that, and then what about that experience was helpful? In what ways did it help?
That was the terrifying part of my life. And that was probably why it took me from November to March to actually go, because I didn't know what to expect. I was going to be away for 3 weeks. People were going to ask questions. I was a manager of my son's hockey team, and I misappropriated funds that I was supposed to be looking after. It's just like, oh my God, some of the stuff that I had to deal with when I got out was horrible. But um, I can't deny it. It was terrifying going in there. I didn't know what to expect. Um, and even after I finished my 21 days, we I don't know how much it's changed at Renison. I know it's still a 12-step program, but I think they've incorporated a little bit more mental health support there than what we had before. Before, when I went, it was just strictly all 12-step stuff. But after I was actually sober for about 9 months, I was volunteering at. There was another example of me giving something back that enhanced me. I was going up to the Renaissance House in Brooklyn every Tuesday night, and we would go with the alumni committee and we would do meetings up there and share with the guys how our experience after being there was. So I was 9 months sober, and the manager asked me if I'd like to be a volunteer counselor. I was back in, 2004, when you didn't have to have a college diploma to do it. So I was more than happy to. But the funny thing was, he said, you have to get you have to, you can come once a week. We'd be glad to have you, but you have to wear a jacket and a tie. And um, this was 9 months after getting sober. I didn't have much of anything. My wages were still being garnished, and I didn't have money. I didn't have a suit, so I went to the Goodwill store in Oshawa, and I bought a jacket for $6. And it's one, when I talk about that, I always get a bit choked up thinking about it. And it just occurred to me recently the reason why I get choked up, because I'm Dutch, and I feel like I probably could have got it for $4. So,
Oh God. And is that jacket hanging in your closet still?
oh, that was 20 years. That was almost 20 years ago. Well, it would be 20 years ago now. So, but the jacket's long gone. I don't know what happened. My wife, I got remarried, and she not one for letting me keep stuff like that around. So nostalgic reasons, but I wore it for 2 years volunteering up there. And I just find that, giving something back it helps so much.
Yeah, that's good advice. That's good advice. Is there anything looking back on that pathway into treatment um, that could have been helpful as we think about helping people move through that, kind of that pathway? Um, is there anything about about knowing what to expect that would have been beneficial or made it a little easier for you, or do you just have to go through that?
Well, I think if you know that the place you're going is going to be helpful and the people that are there because probably for the most part, like me, going back to be a volunteer, the people that were working at that facility are all people that were in 12-step program. So,
Yes,
they're people that are just like us and they know what we've been through.
right.
So that could be a bit comforting for some people. Or I don't think that a lot of people who are therapists or like, MSWs or psychologists, I think they get into that field because they really want to help people. And I think if you know you're going into a facility or some place where you're going to be around people that really truly care about you, it does make it a bit easier. And then once you make that fearful first step, you start to realize that yes, these are people that are really trying to help me. So if you felt enough pain, and you're willing to accept the help, then you've made a transition. But like I said earlier, some people have a lower pain tolerance, and that's really the unfortunate thing is that some people don't make it. And that's a good reminder for me that if I don't keep doing the work, that could be me.
Yeah.
So I've lost friends, firefighters, a lot of firefighters over the years that aren't here today because for whatever reason, um, they just couldn't get through something.
Yeah. There's a question, Bernie, that came in on the chat. Someone is asking about resources to support families who are dealing with addiction in the first responder who is not yet ready to help. And so that's kind of a two-part question. One, if somebody is wanting resources and support, they can reach out to the Encompas program and we can support them in accessing those resources. But I'm wondering, within that question, is there something that you would offer in terms of some insight for family members who are navigating their loved one who is struggling with addiction, not ready to get support and help, in terms of how to support themselves in dealing with a situation like that, but also how to support the person who is struggling?
So the 12-step programs are very wide ranging, as some of you might know. And there is a 12-step program called Al-Anon. And Al-Anon is a program for people who have uh, alcoholics or substance abuse people in their family. And the Al-Anon program teaches. I have been to Al-Anon meetings in the past, and I think what it does is it teaches you how to take care of yourself. Because sometimes you think that you can control the alcoholic or the drug addict, or you're going to make them change, but you can't do that. And um, when you start to take care of yourself, okay, sometimes that alcoholic sees that change in you, and you stop enabling them, and it helps them make a decision to get some help. So it's called Al-Anon. You can look it up. There are meetings all over the place. Again, there's good meetings and there's meetings that may not. I don't want to say a bad meeting. There's no such thing as a bad meeting, but you might go to a meeting where you just don't click with people. But
Yeah.
so you try another one, right? It's
Try
like
another one.
it's like
Yeah.
getting a therapist. You might get a therapist that you just don't feel right with, so
Yeah.
you try another one. And but the Al-Anon program is a great program for people like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I really liked how you highlighted the importance of self-care and taking care of
Hmm.
yourself in that,
Yeah.
because sometimes that's overlooked for sure when someone is trying to help their person. And yeah.
Yeah. I think we have one more question, maybe two. And one
Yeah.
thing that comes to mind to me, Bernie, is, as you know, and as you've lived, the stressors don't go away. And Um, you talked about exposure to things nobody should see building up, but you also talked about pressures at home and family and life, and that all continues. So how can you share some of what's worked for you in responding to those pressures in a healthier way?
Um, so one of the things that I do in the morning, it's a kind of a form of meditation, and by the time my wife gets off to work and the dogs are fed and I clean up some cat puke somewhere in the house and I'm getting angry because everything's like I got to do all this stuff, and I leash the dogs up and I start walking down to the park, and I get to the park, I hear the birds chirping, and when you talk about that God portion of it or that higher power portion of it, it's always been kind of evolving for me. So I still look at that, at my AA group of sober people, as being a power greater than myself. But when I get down to the park, I find that um, that those birds are like a channel for me. It's a reminder just to say, hey, take a pause for a second, be thankful and grateful for what I have today, and just ask for some help. Right? I ask if I can stay clean, help to stay clean and sober, to be a good father, to be a good husband, and take care of my side of the street, right? And it's funny how quickly, after practicing that for years over and over again, how quickly I can turn things around and let go of my resentments just by doing something as simple as that.
It's the practice.
It's practice, and in the beginning, you don't like the practice, but I do now, and it's so funny because it's these dogs that I have that remind me. They get me out, and when I get to the park, then I hear the birds, right? And I've lost both my parents in sobriety, so I feel like when I hear those birds chirping, I feel like that's my parents talking to me. So, anyways, it's you can use anything you want, right? But you just have
Right.
to tap into it.
Yeah. No,
And sometimes it's just that mental thought of going, I'm going to let this stuff as a burden. I don't want it. Here, take it. Someone else can have it, right? I don't want it.
yeah,
And I feel free. It's like I drop my backpack, right?
yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Bernie, I just want to thank you so much. I know how beneficial it is for you to speak out, for people to speak out and share and um, address the stigma against really speaking out, right? And the shame and you're such an inspirational example of doing that and giving back. Um, any last messages that you'd like to give or any last comments, Sue, that you wanted to give as we kind of close out this session?
Yeah, I really appreciate you being able to just humanize these conversations. We identify the risk and the resiliency that's weaved into this life. And your message was really that installation of hope. Sharing your experience, strength, and hope, and letting others know there may be someone watching today that is going to feel like they can reach out now because you so bravely came here and shared today. So thank you for that.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. Well, listen, thank all of you who are on this session. We will have it posted on the Encompass website, and we are here for you. Just a reminder that the Encompass program is here 24/7 for you and for your families. And Suze and her colleagues are there to really help you navigate with any resource support. Many of the team have lived experiences themselves in first responder and mental health, and they do understand. Um, and so please reach in if we can support in any way. And Bernie, thank you again so much. Please keep us posted on
Yes,
on your group. And
thanks for having me.
yeah, thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye bye.